We are.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the February 9th meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask for the introductory recording. We mean business today. It did. Here we go.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and planning department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Thank you. And now I'd ask for a roll call of commissioners. Please remember to use your microphone so we can hear whether you're online or virtual.
Yes, ma'am. Fox?
Present.
Dool?
Here.
McKay?
Here.
Green?
Here.
Bill Johnson?
Here.
Josh Blick? Josh Blick. Absent? Nix?
Here.
Foster?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
Joe Johnson?
Here.
Miles? Ms. Miles? Absent? Hartman?
Here.
Cunningham?
Here.
Williams Bay?
Here.
Ma'am, I show 12 members present and 2 absent.
Thank you. Next, commissioners, you've received the minutes of the January 5th meeting. Does anyone have any changes to those minutes, or I would accept a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Joe Johnson, second from Mr. Hartman. Any further discussion? All in favor of accepting indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. And abstentions from Ms. Miles, who's not present, okay? And then we have the meeting of, the most recent meeting, January 19th meeting minutes were distributed on Monday. I have 4 abstentions for late arrival, early dismissal, McKay, Johnson, and then myself, absent, Fox and Blick. Are there any questions or comments about the January 19th meeting minutes?
Move for approval.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hartman. Second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Green. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And public, I'd like to thank Mr. Dill for stepping in to lead that lovely, long meeting. I pick well when I take a vacation. Next, we will review the agenda to identify any items that we might be able to take on consent. And so we'll begin with the subdivision committee item 2.4 is the public hearing for a subdivision case. We will hear that item. Moving to the plats, 2.2.1 subdivision case 2022-00015, Vineyard Terraces Edition, 215th Street West. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to hear this case? Anyone in the chambers who would like to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually who would like to hear this case? 2.2.1. Hearing none, we'll take that on consent. Item 2.2.2, subdivision 2022-00045, final plat, located at 135th Street West and 117th Street North. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? Hearing none, we can take it on consent. Item 2.2.3, subdivision 2022-00047, final plat, located near South Greenwich Road and East Harry. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? We will take it on consent. Item 2.2.4, subdivision 2022-00064, final plat for Skyway West 6th Edition at 119th Street West and West MacArthur Road, north of West MacArthur Road. Anyone on the commission like to hear that case? Anyone in chambers want to hear that case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear that case? 2.2.4, we'll take that on consent. 2.2.5, subdivision case 2022-00066, Prado Edition, south side of East MacArthur Road and west side of South Broadway. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Does anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? We will take that item on consent. Item 2.2.6, subdivision 2022-00067, Brinley Estates, located southeast corner of East 69th Street and North 95th Street. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? We'll take it on consent. Item 2.2.7, subdivision 2022-00070, Swaney Farm Edition, northeast corner of South Clifton Avenue and East 63rd Street South. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? I rattled that gavel loud, and so I can't imagine you're sleeping out there. Item 2.3 will require a separate motion, so I would entertain a motion for the
Madam
consent
Chair, I
items.
move that we approve items 2.2.1 through 2.2.7 inclusive.
I have a motion from Commissioner Green and a second from Commissioner McKay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Item passes 12-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to the, we'll hear 2.3, the street name change. Public hearing item, well, no, actually, Neil, are you here? Could you just tell us what you're looking for here, and then maybe we could take this by consent? 2.3, street name change.
Neil Straw, planning staff. The street name change was requested by the City of Wichita Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Advisory Board. They like to see the street name of West Squaw Lane changed to West Delano Avenue due to the sensitivity of the word squaw. We did notify the residents. Both City GIS and Traffic Engineering have recommended the street name be approved in addition to the subdivision committee. We are looking today for the MAPC to set a public hearing for March 23rd to consider adoption of the street name ordinance.
And as I understand it, because we're setting a public hearing, we don't need to call for public comment today. Is that correct? Okay. Commissioners, would you like to hear more about this case, or could I entertain a motion to set the public hearing? We have a motion from Commissioner Joe Johnson.
Second.
Second from, it was a tie, Hartman Williams Bay, typist, you decide. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes 12-0. Moving on to the vacation items. Vacation item 2022-00036. I have two commissioners who have indicated to me they want to abstain from voting on this item, Commissioner Bill Johnson and Commissioner Williams Bay. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Does anyone participating in the chambers want to hear this case? Does anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? If not, I would entertain a motion or any discussion. Commissioner Duell has
Second.
moved to accept. Commissioner Hartman, second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstentions?
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, motion passes 12-0 to 10-0 to, math was not my subject, 10-0 to abstentions, and motion passes. I know, I just need you to have some humor in the room. That will bring us to public hearing items. First, conditional use 2022-00056, located East Kellogg Drive and South Greenwich Road. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Okay, staff question. Does anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Okay, we will hear 4.1, and you get to ask your question then. Conditional use 2022-00057. Anyone on the, this is located near North Hoover Avenue, south side of West Central. So North Hoover and West Central. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Actually, we have, does anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Yes. And let's see if there's anybody who wants to hear the case. Anybody participating virtually want to hear this case?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
4.2, we will hear. You did get a revised staff report due to a typographical error. So if you'll just note that you're looking at the revised report. And we'll point out the change at the time of hearing. Item 4.3, this is a zoning case and a conditional use case. Zoning 2022-0076 and conditional use 2022-0055, located south of West 31st Street and near South Broadway. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? There's actually an address, 3255 South Waco. Does anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? Hearing none, we can take these on consent. Item 4.4, zoning case 2022-0077 is located the northeast corner of 63rd Street South and Clifton. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Does anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? And I need to backtrack a bit. Do we have the applicant or agent on 4.2? That's 4925 West Central. Okay, all right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. We can take 4.4 on consent. That brings us to the end of the public hearing items. I would.
I move to approve items 4.3 and 4.4.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Johnson, a second from Commissioner Foster. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Item passes 12-0. Oh, yes, 13-0. Welcome, Commissioner Miles. All right. We will then return to the top of our list. 2.4. Go, Neil. 2.1.
2.1.
2.1. Yes, Neil, please tell us about this public hearing.
Yes, this is an amendment to our subdivision regulations regarding the extraterritorial subdivision regulation authority for Derby. Our subdivision regulations apply to the county do not apply in the county to various sections of land surrounding the city limits of Hayesville, Derby, Mulvane, and Valley Center. Last year, Derby revised the limits of their extraterritorial subdivision regulation authority, which necessitated an amendment to our subdivision regulations to reflect the change. You can see on the map here, this area is east of the Arkansas River, north of 63rd Street South, and west of K-15 Highway. The area was removed from Derby's extraterritorial subdivision authority, and it's currently located within the city of Wichita's urban growth area, so it makes sense that it be within our subdivision jurisdiction and not Derby's. We have the amendment. We've had the amendment reviewed by city law, county law. They've approved it for form. And we will pass this along to city council next if we have an approval today. Any questions for staff?
Questions? So basically, they changed their rules, so we have to change ours.
Yes.
And we're happy to do so, right?
Yes.
Okay, or are we not? All right. Any discussion? Is there anyone who wants to speak on this case present? Anyone virtually who wants to speak on this case? Then I would entertain a motion.
Move we approve.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Green, second from Commissioner Miles. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. Motion passes 13-0. That takes us back to public hearing items. If you're keeping up with the paper flipping right here, we're on 4.1, conditional use 2022-00056. And Aaron, if you would present this case, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Erin Ewok with the Planning Department. Con 2022-00056 is a request to expand an existing conditional use to permit a car wash on property zoned GC General Commercial. The site is located on the southwest corner of East Kellogg Drive and South Greenwich Road. A conditional use was previously approved by the MAPC in 2003 for the east portion of this site, and the car wash operated there until the right-of-way, the Kellogg, was expanded. And so then the property and car wash was raised in 2016 to allow for that expansion. It is currently vacant, and the applicant is proposing to rebuild the car wash with a larger footprint. And therefore, due to the increased size of the car wash, the area of the conditional use is required to be expanded. So staff finds that the conditional use is in conformance with the community investments plan and is recommending approval of the request. The reason why the applicant had asked for the case to be heard is in regard to the staff's recommended conditions. So as far as we understand, they are amenable to all of the listed conditions with the exception of number 5 regarding additional limits to signage. So when the car wash was previously operating in the site, signage was permitted and allowed as permitted in the GC General Commercial District. Staff, the recommended condition restricts that more heavily. So the applicant is asking that the condition go back to what it was previously for the pre-existing conditional use and permit signage per GC. Should the Planning Commission decide that that is appropriate and they would like to recommend or to like to approve the request subject to a change in condition 5, staff is okay with this change. And I will defer to the applicant in regard to information regarding what they're planning on signage and what they previously had on the site.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Green.
On the requirement on number 3, that they are required to have a 6-foot screening fence.
Yes.
The property that abuts that is also zoned general commercial, even though it's residential in nature. Is that a requirement that it be a 6-foot screening fence?
So my understanding is that the ordinance states residential residences as opposed to residential zoning. I might defer to JR on that.
The zoning code calls out screening between commercial districts and a residential district. However, because it is a residential use, staff is recommending this condition to require the fence, even though the zoning districts are commercial. Because it is an established residential use, we are asking for the screening fence as a condition, which is above and beyond the code, just because it is a residential use that's been established.
And the applicants agreed to putting that fence in on staff recommendation?
We have not heard any opposition to that condition, just number 5 was the only one they had comments on.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Any other questions for staff from the commission? Seeing none, I'd call the applicant or agent forward, and you have 10 minutes to tell us about your project.
Thank you. Donald Boos, Director of Real Estate for Blue Beacon Inc. and Charlie's Car Wash, 500 Graves Boulevard, Salina, Kansas. Yes, we did originally develop and operate the east portion of this location from 2003 to mid-2016. We had always planned to return. Prior to the demolition of the structure, we acquired the property to the west, but it was never part of the conditional use because it wasn't part of our property. It was previously Payday Motors, if you may recall. So we are now back to the point of addressing redevelopment here, and we had met with staff. We had a pre-application meeting, and we find their conditions to be acceptable with the exception of the signage, and we weren't aware of that issue until we received the staff comments. That wasn't explained to us prior. And so I did contact staff, and they suggested that I just present today. I will also just quickly on number 3, we don't have a problem with screening. We don't usually get into the real final design until after we obtain these types of approvals. We may talk about a different kind of fence or maybe some other things to assist in the screening, but we'll be happy to screen. And I did have a PDF that was supposed to be, there we are. Okay. Okay, so that is the revised development plan. And let's do that. Okay, I'm sorry. This is the precondition before we were demolished. So there were 2 signs, one along Kellogg, one along Greenwich, and then the Payday Motor sign to the west was present as well. We don't have our final sign package designed, but we were of the understanding that we would have been driven by the underlying zoning, not the stipulation. So we certainly wouldn't have more signage than what was there in 2003 to 2016. But if we were limited to a single 20-foot sign with 80 square feet of signage, that would be problematic given the nature of our business and the size of our investment and number of employees. So we would just respectfully request that that signage be allowed to be governed by the GC zoning. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions for the commission? Or from the commission for the applicant? If he indicated they haven't made a design yet, if we said 6-foot screening and that could be decided later, or do we need to leave the fence in there? Just wondering.
JR corrected me. The requirement for screening next to residential dwellings is actually a supplemental use regulation that goes above and beyond the normal screening requirement. So that condition is actually reflective of the supplemental use regulations for car washes.
So it needs to be a 6-foot fence?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Anyone, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, is there anyone present in chambers who would like to speak on this item? Is there anyone participating virtually who would like to speak on this item? Hearing none, bring it back to the commission. What's your pleasure? Question from Commissioner McKay.
I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Green. A couple of questions. Number one, are we setting any kind of precedence by doing what we're talking about on this fence?
No, sir. Again, the requirement for the screening fence next to residential uses is a existing supplemental use regulation for car washes when they're within 200 feet of residential zoning.
Second.
Director Wadle, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm sorry if it was made before, but a practical reason for why the screening could be beneficial to both the car wash and the neighbor is because they're queuing lanes as they come around. It's going to be a really successful car wash where you're going to have vehicles with headlights that'll be aiming towards the residents to the south. So that's the practical reason why they could be beneficial for both parties.
Okay.
Next question is, in the event that the residential's gone and it goes to commercial, are they allowed to take the fence down?
The way the supplemental use regulation states regarding abutting residential dwelling, if the residential dwelling goes away, then yes, the fence could come down.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question for staff. The signage under GC zoning, what is it, what's the requirements there?
The signage would be allowed at 80% of the lot frontage along the roadway, so it depends on the lot frontage, but probably more than what's listed in this, this condition by
And did
big
we
ways.
compute that amount? Or can we say signage according to what's allowed by the frontage? Yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Green?
Do we have any idea what that signage was like from 2003 to 2016? How did that differ from what is being shown in our staff report?
Can we get the slide back to that? We had a slide with the signage showing, is that correct? Okay.
To try to answer your question, Commissioner, I probably approve those signs, but it's been a little bit ways back there and I kind of don't remember, but I think probably much larger than what's here. It's probably closer to the 80%, but I really don't remember.
Would the applicant have that information?
Do you know what the size of the sign you're allowed by current?
I don't
rules?
recall. You would typically, again, we do our sign packages when we submit the site plan.
I had Commissioner McKay, you had a question? No? Okay.
Do you know
Commissioner
what was there
Foster?
originally?
Well, it's a different name, but it's similar. And instead of that a manual changeable sign portion below what says $7, we don't do the dollar signs anymore. It's now a 5x10 interactive screen, like you see at Kellogg. I'm sorry, at K96 and Rock. That would be more of our prototypical signage.
Okay. Commissioner Foster?
For staff, this condition number 5 is apparently different from the typical sign regulations under GC zoning, is that correct? And if so, why?
We've had a lot of car wash cases, and some have been in more restricted areas or areas with more sensitivity to residential or other type of uses around it. And it could have been a carryover condition from one of those cases.
Okay, does staff have any particular objection to simply going with the sign regulations as per the zone?
No, ma'am, we don't have any hesitation for that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions? Yes, JR.
Philip did a real quick calculation of the frontage. The accuracy isn't verified, of course, but it looks as though on Kellogg, they'd be allowed approximately 184 square foot of signage.
So a little over twice what was in this recommendation. Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to move that we approve with the exception of condition 5, which can be altered to allow the standard signage as per general commercial zoning.
I have a motion from
Second.
Commissioner Foster, second from Commissioner Hartman. Further discussion? I would call the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes 13-0. Thank you for your testimony. All righty. And next, we got a conditional use 2022-00057. And Philip, will you please give us the staff report?
Yes, ma'am. Philip Zevenbergen with the Planning Department. For the record, Con 2257 is a request in the city for a nightclub in the city for a property located at 4925 West Central Avenue. This is on the south side of Central, about half mile west of Northwest Street. Property is zone limited commercial. Their applicant is requesting to operate an event center. So it would provide opportunity to have periodic events per appointment. It wouldn't necessarily be a traditional nightclub per the definition, but as we all are aware, we have to have a nightclub in the city anytime there is alcohol present and entertainment provided as defined by the city code. In order to accommodate the event center to allow these things, we have to request for the nightclub in the city. The event center was currently operating or is currently operating, was given a notice of violation, because even if it was just simply an event center without the nightclub in the city's designation, the Unified Zoning Code requires event centers to be conditional uses in limited commercial zoning when they are within 200 feet of residential uses, among other things, and there's residential zoning, among other things. There's residential zoning within 200 feet across the street. Nightclub in the city has a 300-foot distance requirement, and so in either case, it requires the conditional use in limited commercial. This application is to bring this use into compliance with the zoning code. The properties to the north are single-family residential, and it's a church. Property to the south is limited commercial, but it is developed with an apartment complex. If you want to go ahead, Paul, with the aerial, thank you. Property to the east is zone limited commercial. It's developed as a laundromat. It is under separate ownership. And as we'll see in the site pictures, you'll see there are parking barriers that do separate the parking lots from each other. Property to the west is zone limited commercial, and it's for commercial retail uses. The property does not have any outdoor space that could be utilized. As we'll see through the site photos, there's limited amount of space behind the building between that and the property line where it's fenced. So all events will be conducted indoors. The attached site plan, if you want to go to the site plan, Paul, indicates that the fence on the south property line is a privacy fence. However, a site visit identified that as a chain link fence. And so that will have to come into compliance with the screening requirements of the zoning code. And I'll discuss the conditions of approval here in just a second with those. Paul, can we go through the site pictures? I think it's going to inform some of the information we have next. So this is looking at the site. You have the laundromat to the west. You have, this is the event center as it is now. Next picture. This is again the event center, and then looking to the space to the west. Next picture. This is looking behind the property line. So this is the laundromat right here, and then the continuation of the building is the event center. You can see the chain link fence that existed, but also the proximity to the apartments to the south. Just an approximate measurement using GIS tools, anywhere from 35, maybe 40 feet between the buildings, not just property lines, between this building and the nearest residential building. Because of that, staff is recommending several conditions of approval to help mitigate possible negative impacts, specifically noise, being the number one thing of if there's an event going on with entertainment, especially bass notes coming through, subwoofers and things generally pass through obstructions pretty well. One of those conditions of approval is hours of operation, which is why you have a revised staff report in front of you. As pointed out to staff this week, or actually late last week, that we had a typo in our hours of operation. Item number 3 would limit the entertainment, so they could have events past that, but the entertainment portion of the event to 8 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and the original staff report said 11 a.m. on Saturday, and it meant to say restricted to 11 p.m. So entertainment would have to end at 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, not 11 a.m. So that's the purpose of your revised staff report, is to make sure that typo in the conditions was corrected. Another recommendation from staff for conditions of approval based on the proximity of the residences to the south is that the screening fence actually be an 8-foot screening fence and not the minimum 6-foot screening fence based on the nature of the use and again, the proximity of the residences to the south. Parking for this site, the applicant site plan, the capacity of the building isn't necessarily unknown or isn't necessarily known. However, the site plan indicates 17 parking spaces. The parking requirement for an event center is 1 space per 2 occupants. And so if they only have 17 spaces, they are limited to an occupancy of 34 based on their parking requirement. Again, the parking area to the east is under separate ownership. There are parking barriers between them. Any type of use of that property for their off-street parking would have to be done by a shared parking agreement between the property owners. Of any spillover parking that would go over there, they do not have right to use that unto themselves. The comprehensive plan identifies the property as appropriate for commercial land uses. West Central in this location is primarily developed with a strip commercial development all the way from West Street to Hoover and I-235. When you get farther to the east and farther to the west, you generally have a little bit more intensity of commercial uses on both sides of the street. This portion of West Central generally has a little bit more of a less intense commercial use. Yes, there's the strip center right here with the laundromat and this event space and the retail uses to the west, but across the street you have a church, you've got residences across the street, you've got residential properties to the south, you've got residences over here. So you can even see here based on the zoning of just kind of the intensity generally diminishes here in the middle before it picks up again as you travel further along West Central. The locational guidelines talk about development that occurs that it's appropriate to its context. An event center may provide entertainment and alcohol, which could create detrimental impacts such as noise to the residential development to the south. Because there are no outdoor space, this is kind of tricky for staff to analyze. Because there's no outdoor space and based on the size of the building, staff feels that it could be contextually appropriate based on conditions of approval that would help limit and mitigate the possible negative impacts. It's not a very large event space. It's not going to be something having an event possibly every night. Usually these things are rented out typically closer to the weekends, but you generally don't have an event booked every single day. If you mitigate when the entertainment can be, it can limit the possible negative impacts to the surrounding developments. The locational guidelines also promote using higher density residential to buffer between higher intensity commercial uses and lower intensity residential uses, which is in a sense what you're getting is you've got the commercial uses along Central. You do have higher density residential development with the apartments to the south, and those in a sense buffer the higher intensity uses along Central from the lower density residential farther south. So in a sense, we're following that pattern, and based on the type of use and the scale of the building, we feel that it's appropriate in terms of in the context of the area. Yes, it's a commercial use that could have possible negative impacts, but a lot of other commercial uses already existing can have also possible negative impacts as well. So we do feel it is contextual to the area based on its scale. So overall, staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions in your staff report. The very first one being that nightclub in the city is going to be ancillary to the use of an event center, so that somebody can't just come in the future and actually have a nightclub that could potentially operate more freely than what an event center is, knowing those are pre-scheduled events like a wedding reception or something like that. That the nightclub in the city adhere to the supplemental use regulations. We talked about the hours of operations between 8 p.m. or to 8 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday, 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. There shall be no amplified music outdoors, including speakers, on any patio, whether enclosed or unenclosed. That prevents any type of addition on for an outdoor space. If there would ever happen in the future, that protects it from that. We talked about the 8-foot screening fence along the south property line. The parking lot shall be kept free of trash and debris. No loitering or congregating or excessive noise shall be permitted in the parking lots. And then some standard language regarding enforcement or violations and things like that. The only public comment that I have heard has been from representatives of the laundromat to the east. They are not in favor. I don't know if they are with us today, but they did speak in opposition to the request. I have not heard, citing just possible impacts to their property. I don't know if they understood that it was for an event center, or they might have thought it might have been a traditional nightclub request, but I did hear from them. And I can go through the rest of the site photos if you want to pick up where we left off, Paul. So this is on the apartment parking lot looking north. The building that you see there is the back end of the event space. Again, the chain link fence that is there. Next picture. This is looking across the street at the church. Next picture. This is looking to the east. This is property east of the laundromat, but basically there's no obstruction from the parking lots to this property to the east. Next picture. And this is looking to the northeast, which is a bank. Next picture. And I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Miles?
So Philip, I know that you have in here the capacity for events is limited to 34 based on parking. When I checked out the website, it says their capacity is 176. If we were to approve this, would then their capacity be limited to 34? Because there's a lot of different noise comes from 34 people and 176 people.
No, it would not, because, 4 people could show up in one car. There was no condition of approval limiting it to 34. They just, in a sense, it was addressing they don't have any more than 17 spaces. If they want more people there, and people would have to find other places to park. Does that make sense? So we don't have a condition that limits their capacity. It was just identifying if only 2 people and they only use the parking lot that is theirs, technically only 34 people would be there. But of course, more people can come in one car. They can use street parking on side streets. So we don't have a capacity limit for them.
So it doesn't necessarily align with what we see with other things that we approve, where there is so many parking lots supposed to be provided per capacity.
Right.
Commissioner Green, you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a fence question. In the, I guess under the background, it says that staff is recommending fence be upgraded to an 8-foot solid screening. It says recommended, but then in the recommendations, it says shall install the 8-foot screening fence. I know that the property immediately to the south is zoned LC.
Yes.
Also, and I assume that the reason why why we shall have the fence there is because of the residential in nature properties that are south of that.
Yes, when we were reviewing it, what really instigated it for us is the proximity of the buildings next to each other. Even though it's all within one cohesive zoning, we said recommend in the background, but our recommendation of approval comes with those conditions that we are recommending. And yes, in this case, the recommendation means shall for us. Of course, this body has the opportunity to amend any of the conditions that we are recommending.
The second part, I guess, is this chain link fence. Are they going to be required to put the screening fence along the entire back stretch there, or is it just going to be chain link, then 64 by 8-foot wood fence, and then chain link on either side?
They're only required to screen property that is theirs. And when it comes to whether or not the chain link fence is replaced or whatever, it depends on whose fence it is. If the fence is not theirs, they will have to put up a fence you'd have the chain link fence, and then on their property, they would have their fence. It all depends on whose fence it is and where the current chain link fence is constructed, whose property it's on. But no, they would only be required to screen their portion of their property.
So there'll be 64 feet of screening fence and then chain link on either side.
Correct.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cunningham.
The laundromat, their hours, will they be competing for parking in there, or is there a separation between the parking lots?
There is a separation between the parking lots. Where the red line is here, there are parking barriers along that red line that prohibit vehicular traffic from freely flowing through. You could potentially drive over them if you wanted to, but it's definitely a delineated line indicating that the two properties are separate and that the parking lots aren't shared. So individuals coming to the laundromat use the laundromat's driveway. Individuals coming to the event center are using the event center's driveway because of those parking barriers. And those barriers are there in order to provide 90-degree parking along that property line for the event center. So with cars parked there, it even becomes more prohibitive of people going between the property lines. If they were to, knowing a typical laundromat probably does not close at 5 p.m. I don't know exactly when the laundromat closes, but it's probably later in the evening to where they could be competing for hours. But again, they are two separate spaces, and technically the event center is not allowed to use their parking without their permission.
Okay, was that part of their objection?
If I recall so, yes, that they were concerned about overflow parking on their property.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
I don't know,
Commissioner?
a question or observation. When I look at that picture, looking west along the rear of the property, and we talk about an 8-foot screening fence, I guess we're screening the building from the residence over on the other side. But then we talk about mitigating noise as well. A fence that's that close to the building, I can't see how we're gonna mitigate any noise. I mean, that's gonna be coming through that brick wall. It looks just like it's a lot of extra expense to me for the applicant, when I look at it. I mean, replacing that chain link fence with an 8-foot wooden fence. I mean, wooden fences are expensive. That's my observation.
Thank you. Any additional questions for staff at this point? If not, then we would call forward the applicant. And if you'd state your name and address, and then you have 10 minutes to tell us about your event center.
Hi, Melanie Collins, case CON 202257, 4925 West Central. My attorney, Pat, is available also. I'm gonna do a little background and then I'll have him do most of the talking. At the time that I purchased it, it was an event center. It was called the PB Event Center, and it was, hadn't been used in a while. We purchased it to do an upscale venue focused on weddings, but we've also hosted like family reunions, corporate meetings, and birthday parties. We're not designed or have, any will to do things like raves or dance parties, other than what's part of a wedding or a reception. We would like to be able to permit customers to have live music and entertainment inside the building and to hire a bartender to serve alcohol at their functions. Let's see, providing we previously applied for a temporary liquor permit, and we were approved. And then we applied a second time. We were told that that was done in error, and that's what started all of this. And we had to because a CUP was required. So we immediately had to reschedule and move a bunch of events around to, be in compliance until we got here. I feel like at this point, I want to turn it over to Pat because I feel like I'm stumbling a little here, and I know he's, the pro.
Okay, please come forward. You have about 7.5 minutes. Oh, he's online. Okay, go ahead.
I am, yes, thank you. So for the most part, we agree with the staff report, but there are a couple of concerns that we've got. And really, the concern deals with the hours of operation. The staff is recommending that there be no entertainment at the facility after 9 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday, or after 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. And in general, the concern about noise is understandable, but we're concerned that the proposed limits are unnecessarily strict in this location. The first reason that is because those noise concerns are really addressed with other mitigation measures in this case. The facility is laid out in a way that the entertainment is entirely inside, so there's no outside area generating noise. And the building is situated so that it's got double masonry walls at the area that's nearest to the residential property. So the residential multifamily property is on the south side, and we've seen pictures of that, but we've got a brick wall and then we've got an inner concrete wall. And then in addition to that, in remodeling the facility, what we've done is installed sound insulation on the inside. So the risk of noise to the residences is really significantly mitigated by the nature of this particular building. The potential for sound is really more likely on where the entrance is, if the doors are open during the operation of the facility, but that's facing central, where you've got traffic noise anyway, and you don't have that residence. And then you've got the buildings both on the right and on the left outside the front aren't residential, they're commercial properties. So we don't have as significant of a noise concern as we might. And the suggested limits on entertainment are also inconsistent with that use that's right next door. So we've got a laundromat that has people coming and going, has obviously machines that are operating there, and that is closer to the nearest house than the entertainment facility is. And it doesn't have any restrictions on the hours of operation, but it is currently open until 9 p.m. every night. Other event centers with which we would compete don't have these limits. So we're not necessarily asking that there be no limits on the hours for entertainment, but rather we think that in light of the sound mitigation and insulation that we have and the configuration of the building, limits of 10 p.m. on weeknights and midnight on Friday and Saturday is more appropriate. What we're looking at is a venue that will largely cater to upscale wedding sorts of events, and there may be dances after a wedding that will continue to go later than the hours of operation that are currently suggested. So we would like to have those hours adjusted from what's recommended to 10 p.m. and midnight. I also wanted to just address the question of parking. There is a operation right now that the operator has to allow people to come in by being picked up from a parking lot off-site. And so there's basically a shuttle service that would bring people in if we have issues with having adequate parking for a particular event.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
Can I make one comment about the parking?
Sure, go ahead.
The guy next to me, we do have a parking agreement with the guy on the other side, not the laundromat. When we put out the bricks, we didn't realize we would need to open that to indicate that approval. So we blocked it all off, and then people just park at the next door place if they want to. And I also own a building on West Street that has a huge parking lot.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Is there anyone in the chambers who would like to speak on this item? Thank you. You can be seated. We'll see if we have any public comment. Is there anyone participating virtually who would like to speak on this item? Okay, I will bring this back to the commission. What do you think? Commissioner Williams Bay.
Repeat the hours of operation they're requesting again, please.
I heard weeknights until 10 p.m. and weekends until midnight. And the staff recommendation was weeknights till 8 p.m. and weekends until 11 p.m. Right, Friday, yeah. Commissioner Foster?
I would like to move that we approve per staff comments with the exception of adjusting condition number 3 to allow their operation until 10 p.m. on Sundays through Thursdays and until midnight on Fridays and Saturdays.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Who is the second on this?
I'm sorry, motion Commissioner Foster, second Commissioner McKay. Any further discussion?
Question, are we keeping the fence suggestion in? There was comments about the fence.
That was my intent.
Okay,
I'm going to take the fence out.
okay.
Commissioner
Okay.
Nix?
I kind of do. I mean, I think it's a waste of money, given the configuration of it and the appearance of the buildings next door. And I mean, it just seems like a big expense to me in terms of the applicant. I'd take it out.
And I think about the trash that will collect between the two fences, which can make it more difficult to keep it looking clean.
That is a point. Does anybody object to taking the fence out? All right, I would like to revise my motion to also change the condition and not require an 8-foot privacy fence along the south property line. That's condition number 5.
Mr. McKay, or Commissioner McKay, do you accept the modified motion? Okay, we have a modified motion extending the hours to 10 on weeknights, midnight on Friday and Saturday, and removing the item number 5. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
I have one opposition. Motion passes 12-1. Thank you. I did. My math is improving. That moves us into our non-public hearing item, downtown parking and multimodal plan. I would like to call Tia Ramat with Transit Forward. And before Tia begins, I would ask Bob Duell, the chairman of the Advanced Plans Committee, to just report on the committee's activity this morning.
Sure, thank you. We heard a presentation on this in Advanced Plans this morning. And after considerable questions and discussion, we agreed to recommend to the MAPC to move the plan forward to the city council. And today you will hear what the proposal is. It's more of the nature of a process than it is a particular item approval. With that,
Based on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she's gonna start with
based
that.
on
Yes, you got handed out.
the additional, the handout there describes the conditions that are important to the city.
I don't know if I dare do this, but I did it last time.
Okay,
But since we approved this in advanced plans, I would like for the MAPC to approve it and pass it on to the city council as we do subdivision.
I would just like to say that for those of us who are not on Advanced Plans Committee and who get these things with not any particular foreknowledge, it's kind of nice to have at least a short presentation before we vote on them.
okay,
I would pull my motion.
okay. Thank you, Joe.
I agree.
It was a try, right? Okay. Tia,
Hi.
why don't you go ahead and please begin your presentation and introduce your co-presenter if we have one.
I'd love to. And to Commissioner McKay's point, you have a piece of paper in front of you that looks like this. And at the very top of that paper, it references the City of Wichita's mission statement.
And in advanced plans, there was a really meaningful discussion about this plan and its alignment with that mission statement, and it is to make Wichita safe, to build dependable infrastructure, to grow the economy, and to provide conditions for living well. I think those are the three driving wishes and mission behind this plan. I'd like to introduce you to Mallory Baker with Walker Consultants. Mallory is located in Denver. Mallory, would you mind unmuting yourself and telling us a little bit about Walker?
Of course, yes. Hello. Thank you so much for having me today and listening to this presentation. I'm sure the desire of some to not hear this presentation again is understandable, but we're excited to be here today and very grateful for your time. Walker Consultants is a broad-based parking and transportation planning and design firm. We have offices nationally, but the office that we're serving the city of Wichita out of is in Denver, Colorado, and that's where I am based. I had the pleasure of being a part of the original development of this plan back in 2018 and 2019, and have been leading this adoption process and consensus building process alongside Tia and her team. And we've met with many district advisory boards, community groups, and commissions and boards with the city over the last few months, and we're looking forward to speaking with you all today about this framework. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mallory. And again, this is a plan to have a plan. This is a complementing plan to the Downtown Streets Plan that was just passed by City Council. However, this plan is a management, not an operational strategy. It's not a thing that's funded with a budget, yet we're looking for general agreement from leadership that they're okay with the strategies within this plan for operating. So it's a philosophical document, if you will. All right, and with that, I'm going to dive right in. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a quick overview of today's agenda. I'm not going to read it to you. We're going to tell you what's in the plan and focus on the operational strategies at the end. And I think I'll allow Mallory to do most of the talking this evening. She truly is the expert with this thing because she worked on it under the direction of Planning Director Wadle. And when I came on board a year and a half ago, I inherited it. So I've been working with her and she knows the ins and outs. Please go ahead, 2 more slides to the map. This plan began in 2018 and it was put on ice during COVID. It was a complete plan when it was put on the shelf. The area this plan covers is shown on this map. There's a little bit of Delano. There's the area around Century 2. There's the Water Walk District, the Arena District, Old Town, and the Government District here around this building. The city owns and manages 13,000 parking spaces within this rough boundary. And we do it with a skeletal team. I have 1 parking enforcement manager and a budget that's upside down almost every year. And the help of a company called the Car Park, who are professional parking operators. So when we have events, you lease parking from the city through those people. So go to the next slide, please. This has followed the same process as the Downtown Streets Plan, and I appreciate that this group never really got the Downtown Streets Plan presentation, so I'll back up a little bit. When I came to work with the city of Wichita, we had to pull these out from being in the refrigerator from COVID and thaw them out and exercise them. So I have given presentations on this plan and the other plan to roughly 17 groups each to gain feedback and build consensus and modify what was in the plan that didn't seem to strike a chord with people still before it was ready to come to groups like yours and hopefully onward to City Council. We have a reappointed steering committee. This plan has been visited to most of the district advisory boards, to the transportation advisory boards. It's been presented to downtown Wichita. And if I'm lucky, it may go to city council in April. So, next slide, please. And next slide, this is the same process restated. And with this, I'd love to just give Mallory the microphone and allow her to talk to you about the importance of parking management.
Thank you so much, Tia, and thank you again, commissioners, for making the time for this presentation today. So first, we wanted to talk a little bit about the foundation upon which the recommendations and strategies that you'll hear about in a moment rest. And Tia already mentioned the alignment of this plan, kind of the impetus of this plan, and alignment with the mission statement of Wichita in terms of safety, infrastructure, quality of life, and economic vitality. And we'll dig into those components a bit more, but that really was the impetus of thinking about how we can leverage parking management and innovations of parking management to achieve those missions and goals. Firstly, the importance of parking management is a fundamental guiding principle for this plan and the strategies and recommendations that follow. So as Tia mentioned, the city of Wichita manages over 13,000 parking spaces. Those are on-street spaces, off-street spaces, including both structures and lots throughout the study area that Tia showed. And we know that supply, the sheer number of parking spaces that we have available to us is not the only important factor in creating a parking system that works for everybody, that works for visitors, that works for customers, that works for residents, that works for employees. Rather, when we just rely on the sheer number of parking spaces, we can have challenges that lead to frustrating user experiences, lead to demand distribution challenges, and just result in a lack of meaningful investment and efficiency of the infrastructure we have available to us. So we know that parking needs to be managed actively and strategically in order to function well. Secondly, we know that Wichita is really thinking about how to become a more multimodal place and supportive of not just cars, but also biking, walking, scooters, rideshare, transit, all travel choices. So we can leverage parking management decisions to support travel choice for all Wichitans. And that's a key component of this effort. Next slide, please. So why is parking management important? We know that, when you just build parking and you just think about supply, that only solves part of the problem. So why do we need to actively manage parking assets? Well, for a number of reasons. And we really think that this really deeply aligns with Wichita's mission statement as a city. Parking management can improve user experience and reduce frustration. We've all been in situations where there might be parking, but the supply isn't managed. So we might be late to lunch or late to a meeting and we can't find parking. We're circling the block over and over. Parking management can help reduce and mitigate those negative consequences that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. Secondly, parking management, especially when we deploy it across the study area that we're considering, can support a cohesive sense of place for downtown Wichita, a consistent parking management program where the technology is consistent, where there's signage and wayfinding, where people clearly understand what parking assets and options are available to them, can really help people feel like they're in a certain place, like they're in downtown Wichita and they know what to expect. Thirdly, parking management can enhance economic vitality and vibrancy by encouraging turnover in the spaces that are really needed for short-term parking for customers and visitors and people that are going to bring economic vibrancy to our downtown. And finally, effective parking management can ensure that the Parking and Multimodal Fund can continue to be self-sustaining by making sure we're deploying resources effectively in ways that help distribute demand adequately, and also that we're seeing where we can generate revenue to make sure that Parking and Multimodal Fund can be self-sustaining well into the future and not draw from other financial resources that the city needs to spend in other key areas. Next slide. So when we did this plan back in 2018, we identified a number of core challenges that, based on our conversations with the community and staff, are still present today. So number one, Wichita is really in transformation, and it's an amazing transformation in terms of development and redevelopment, and also demographics and transportation behaviors. So changes to parking management are needed to support this transformation, support the continued development and revitalization of our communities and neighborhoods, but also demonstrate the value of the city's parking assets and the city's curb space, which are indeed expensive to maintain and really important to the city's functionality. Secondly, we know based on our data that we collected a few years back, but also because of continued conversations with staff and observations in the city, that parking supply in aggregate far exceeds demand. So that means in terms of the total number of parking spaces that we have available to us publicly, those 13,000 spaces, only about 50% or below are filled, even at peak periods. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't demand crunches in certain areas, which is telling us that we can't just build our way out of this problem. We have to strategically manage our way out of this problem. Next slide, please. So this next slide will underscore a little bit what we just discussed. And I don't want to get too hung up on this. This data was collected in 2018, and things have changed since then, of course. But based on our conversations with staff and based on our knowledge of the city today, the story is still the same. We know that really we need to look at this as a management issue. We can't build our way out of this problem. That won't solve it. So this data that was collected in 2018 just underscores the fact that generally in aggregate, parking is underutilized in all of those different study areas that Tia showed us. Generally, 85% occupancy is viewed as an industry ideal in terms of efficient use of a parking asset. And once we hit that 85% threshold, that's when things are getting really full. And then we might move to some sort of management initiative to balance demand in an improved way. Next slide, please. This next slide is simply a map that kind of reflects what we just talked about. We, again, won't spend too much time on it. Again, 2018, things have changed, but generally the patterns are still the same and the story is still the same. So in aggregate, we have plenty of parking. However, you might be familiar with some of the locations of these demand hotspots along Douglas Avenue, et cetera. That doesn't mean that there aren't challenging areas in which to find a parking space. So that kind of underscores our understanding that we need to have some management skills and tools in our toolbox to help mitigate these challenges.
Mallory, could you quickly explain the red, yellow, green?
Absolutely,
sorry to interrupt
yes. So if you see these little circle, so I'll explain everything on this map. These little circles with the white, the numbers, those are just block numbers that helped in data collection in terms of references on the data collection sheet. So don't worry about those. They're pretty meaningless for our conversation. The big green areas indicate areas that are very underutilized, typically under 50%. So those are very underutilized areas. The yellow is a bit busier, orange is a bit busier, but still under industry ideal of 85%. The red areas are 85% occupied and above. So those are areas where we may concentrate our management initiatives so we can reduce those demand distribution challenges and balance demand. The little thin lines indicate on-street blocks, block faces where people are parking, and the big blocks are off-street facilities that are located within those blocks.
Thank you.
Tia, anything else you want me to cover before
I just
we move
wanted
on?
to make sure, we weren't just flashing big maps at people. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I don't think people should get hung up on the exact precise nature of this map. I think that the fundamental concept really is we have a lot of parking available to us, but there are areas where we have demand concentrated. So that's why we're focusing on management rather than constructing additional supply. Next slide. So moving on to some other core challenges, in conversation about having parking assets and maintaining parking assets, we know that maintaining parking assets is very, very expensive. And there needs to be a clear value proposition for those assets, meaning that they need to be used effectively and efficiently, and they need to be serving the community. We also know that there have been substantial advancements in parking technology and transportation technology that we can use to benefit users and Wichitans and the community generally to balance demand, support other modes of travel, and address those localized shortages that we were just looking at. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we did is we created a vision, kind of in keeping with Wichita's overall mission statement as a city, and in concert with a steering committee that we had put together for the purpose of this plan development. And this vision statement has been shared with community groups, the district advisory boards, as well as the steering committee, which was reprised for this plan adoption process. So I'll just read it to you. And the only comment that we've really received on this vision statement so far is that 2040 is too far down the line. You know, we really want to do something now. And so hopefully we'll be able to move this to city council so we can actually work on implementing some of these processes. But here we go. In 2040, the city of Wichita will be a community where parking contributes to the civic, social, and economic vitality of the community. Parking will be a high quality, integral part of a dynamic, connected, and seamless multimodal transportation system. And the city's parking system will strive to be convenient and efficient for a diverse and comprehensive range of users. Next slide, please. So how are we achieving that vision statement? That's kind of the umbrella under which our strategies rest. And now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of what strategies are we actually recommending to achieve that goal. Well, our strategies fall into 3 key buckets. And this first bucket, parking management strategies, really thinks about the user experience and how they are experiencing the parking system. Next slide, please. So this first strategy, and I know that you all have been furnished a copy of the plan, so please feel free to review the plan in more detail to understand the particular action steps and descriptions of these strategies in greater detail. However, we'll go over them in brief. The first strategy is really leveraging technology to improve the customer experience. And that can happen in a number of ways at various touch points over the customer's experience with the parking system. One, we might use trip planning and parking planning tools so customers and visitors can in fact choose a parking asset where they wish to park before even leaving their home or their place of business. The second touch point might be wayfinding and guidance that we can direct customers and drivers once they're already on the road to appropriate parking facilities and maybe even share occupancy information with them, which can also improve staff's understanding of utilization in those facilities. Other ways might be to use technology to improve the enforcement experience. And a final way might be to integrate mobile payment options and different payment options, smarter meter technology, so that coins aren't the only way that people can pay for parking in places where paid parking is a factor. Strategy 2 is improving parking enforcement operations. As Tia said, the parking enforcement that we have currently is quite lean. So it's really hard for us to use parking enforcement as a turnover strategy. Currently, enforcement is really complaint-based. So we can't use enforcement as a way to get long-term parkers off parking areas that should be allocated to short-term parkers and visitors and customers and help that economic vitality and vibrancy. And strategy 3 is addressing parking shortages strategically. And really what that means is we know that we have a limited number of resources. So we need to use data collection, and we want to deploy and empower staff to go out and collect data about the parking system, update what we have currently, so we can understand, hey, where do we have those demand crunches? And we can use that information to deploy our resources appropriately and scale up parking management initiatives, for example, enacting time limits, enacting more intensive enforcement, perhaps even enacting paid parking, perhaps even removing paid parking in areas or removing time limits in areas where demand is quite low. We can use that information to address those demand distribution challenges in a strategic and systematic way. Next slide, please. So the second bucket in which we have strategies is kind of the back of house, the organization, administration, and funding strategies. And this is really our backbone infrastructure that we can leverage to achieve these parking management goals and initiatives. Next slide. So really, the first strategy we're already doing. So we're already real well on our way to achieving the strategy actually, but the strategy is really just to reduce duplicative effort across multiple departments. So consolidating transportation functions and administration into a single department dealing with both parking and transportation, all things mobility, so that we can reduce duplicative effort and increase efficiency. And again, the city has already committed to doing that and is already doing so currently. Strategy 5 is improving cost recovery for regular operations of the parking and multimodal fund. So this strategy will really help prepare us, set us up for success in the future, set us up for long-term sustainable health of the parking and multimodal fund. So whatever happens in terms of the day-to-day needs, enforcement, operations, staffing, we are able to cover that effectively with the revenue coming into the fund. Strategy 6, improving cost recovery for repairs and maintenance of parking assets. So again, the same thing. Improving the long-term ability of the parking and multimodal fund to use its own revenues to furnish repairs, maintenance of parking assets, and something we really heard a lot of during our community meetings. Frankly, some of the parking structures that the city of Wichita owns are in disrepair. They're dirty in some cases, they have poor lighting, and that's because we don't have the funding or the staffing to conduct those repairs and maintenance. So this will help set us up for success. So all of the parking assets that we have are fit to serve the community of Wichita.
Mallory, this is Ann Fox, the chair. And
hi, hello, Chair.
This is great information, but I think this is where we got in our advanced plans committee a little confused about, is this a plan that needs a budget? And the thing we found most helpful, if you're able to pull up the actual plan, pages 33 and 34, it shows the plan for a plan. And that we thought really helped us to understand what we're approving right now.
Yes,
are you able to get to that?
Chair, let's pull that up. Thank you so much.
So if you think of a plan for a plan, it's a decision-making matrix.
Precisely.
If I might summarize it in that way.
This?
Yes, that, exactly. So that when our city staff is faced, we know there's congestion on Douglas, we know there's congestion around Century 2, and so this plan leads them through a process to make decisions, and we are asking the city council to approve this process as a decision-making framework. And then they can start to address the problem areas and have a method to systematically approach without going straight to building. So can you just walk us through one of those little patches? There's a lot of words, but I think it will give us a sense of the flow chart. Page 33 and 34, if you have the plan in front of you. And I don't know that everybody received the full plan, so I think that's part of the difficulty.
I have a copy up here if somebody would like, is dying for a, here you go, Cindy.
Well, I'd like to see everybody on the planning commission get a copy.
Get a copy, right. And I think, do we have that many copies somewhere? Okay. But then we can't review it either, so, okay.
If it's electronic, just email it to us.
Okay. But this seems to be core of what we're being asked to approve, not the details of the content, but rather the process.
That's correct. This is really the crux of the plan, as the chair is saying. So really, currently, there's not a clear decision-making framework for making parking management decisions, and in many cases, the areas within the city, within the study area, that have parking management interventions, such as paid parking and such as time limits, don't match up with this demand-based approach. So demand is what tells you that you need parking management to achieve a goal. So this flow chart, this plan will really help arm and empower staff with a clear strategy that anyone can follow. And the plan also includes some regimentation around data collection processes. So again, I know we talked about, we collected data back in 2018, a lot has changed. Well, this plan will cue staff up and give staff the resources that they need to collect data, to collect information so that they can follow this process.
And the process really is that we observe curbside or in lots what the occupancy is and the capacity is, on weekdays and weekends, and we make management decisions based upon that capacity. So when things approach 85%, our first step would be to create on-street time limits, for example. We would not jump to paid parking.
Like at the Monarch, where every space says 2-hour parking.
Yeah, exactly. She's got it. And if that truly doesn't create enough vacancy within the lot, and there is such a demand for that lot, we may begin implementing paid parking. We know that's a deeply unpopular concept here in Wichita, and we will be working very slowly toward that. But that really is the intent of this plan and the heart of it.
And one other thing about supply and adding supply, this plan and the adoption of this plan doesn't kneecap Wichita in terms of never adding additional parking ever again. And in fact, the decision tree, with increasing levels of management and intervention, ultimately, if you cannot solve the demand problem with management, you may look to adding supply. However, building additional parking supply and maintaining parking assets, which is something that the city of Wichita is approaching currently, is a really expensive endeavor. So we want to be really sustainable, really judicious in terms of how we allocate our resources, the precious resources that everyone in the city needs for a wide variety of community needs, not just parking.
At this point, I would like to just pause and see if any glaring questions are coming to the commission. Anything that you have heavy on your mind about this? Recognizing it's a plan for a plan.
I find it much more clear now. Thank you.
Okay.
You have my permission.
I move we approve this and on the city council as the wording exists in the advanced plans.
I would, we have a motion from Commissioner Joe Johnson. Would anyone entertain a second? A second from Commissioner Warren. Any further, I would like to add in the discussion that I believe every member of the Planning Commission ought to see the plan. It will still go to City Council, but that will give you a sense. And remember, the strategies are, some priorities have been set, but they're not in stone. The plan is what we're looking at. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of moving this forward, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I believe we've lost Mr. Johnson, so motion passes 11-0. Is he still present? 12. Yeah, 12. Motion passes 12-0. And this will then be moved forward to the city council, and you'll all receive a digital copy of the plan.
Thank you very much, and thank you,
The
Scott.
second was Commissioner Warren. Motion, Commissioner Joe Johnson, second, Commissioner Warren. Final vote, 12-0.
Tia, I'd just like to say you've done an excellent job in this with your consultant, and we much appreciate it.
Yes, and Mallory, it's not that we don't love you, but you helped us this morning to understand so
I couldn't
well.
live without our consultants
Thank
and
you
Scott
very much
Whittle,
for your
and
time.
this has been very good for me, so thank you.
And then non-agenda items, I just want to remind you that the next meeting is slated to occur back in the city council chambers. This is because of the Belmont case will be we anticipate a large contingency of public comment due to the Belmont case. Yes, I hope so. But you never know. This will also position you, yes. That is also the evening of the State of the City address by our mayor. So that would put us into the city chambers for that. However, they have to set up at 5 o'clock, so it gives us a boundary for the end of the meeting as well. So that's right. So we have to stop at 5, and we know, so just be reminded, we're planning to hold that meeting in chambers, city council. Well, and if we have a reason for a deadline, because our mayor will be speaking, then we could by legal counsel advice, potentially lower that amount of speaking time. All right, that's all we have for today. I call this meeting adjourned. Boom. Boom. Oh my God, was that rude?